A predictive development approach, also referred to as the Waterfall approach or a plan-driven approach, is the most traditional development approach. It details the project scope and requirements from the beginning of the project and thoroughly plans the project schedule and budget accordingly before the project execution. As detailed planning occurs from the beginning of the project, the predictive approach is suitable for projects that can be clearly foreseen. The project governance in plan-driven projects is bureaucratic and hierarchical, which is not the case for Agile projects. If the project contains lots of uncertainties and/or is expected to go through significant changes in scope and requirements, the Agile approach will be a better alternative. For example, a predictive approach would be very suitable for a building construction project, as the building needs to be designed in detail before construction. Imagine designing and constructing only the first 2 floors of a building, and then deciding to add additional floors. In any building project, every building element is interconnected to the point that the building must be designed as a whole. The foundation of the building is designed according to the load it will carry, meaning that all the floors and the loads need to be determined right from the first phase of the project. For that reason, project scope and requirements must be determined before construction starts. On the other hand, using a predictive approach would not be a good fit for a software development project, which may go through significant changes in project scope and requirements due to rapid changes in the marketplace and technology. In predictive projects, defining all the details up front allows the creation of a detailed project schedule and budget in the early phases, reducing project risks. As project scope and requirements are defined up front, it is possible to request fixed-priced bids from different sellers for completing the project. Competition may ensure a reasonable price, and you will know how much you will spend beforehand. Defining the details up front leaves little room for arguments as the work progresses and reduces the need for constant collaboration between key stakeholders. However, as everything is agreed on up front, making any changes to the project later will cause more problems in the predictive approach compared to using a change-driven development approach. The predictive approach is most suitable for projects that progress phase by phase, where the start of one phase depends on and follows the completion of the previous phase. Following is a sample life cycle for a construction project for which the predictive development approach is most suitable. In this example, the project phases develop sequentially, starting from the feasibility phase to design, planning, construction, and turnover. This development approach has been given the name Waterfall because the project phases develop sequentially from one phase to another downward like a waterfall. If the phases in the project's life cycle need to be performed more than once, or in cycles throughout the whole project, using a change-driven approach can be a better choice. It is also important to note that in the predictive approach, there is typically a single delivery of the final product that ends the project. For instance, in the case of a typical building construction project, the building is ready for occupancy at the end of the project. Lastly, let's take a look at the ultimate tips for exam success. Thoroughly knowing the details of each development approach is the foundation to understanding the project management practices used in each approach. The methods, tools, and techniques used to manage a project vary depending on the development approach selected. Some exam questions may not specify the development approach used in the project being mentioned. In such cases, you need to understand which development approach is being used from the information presented to make the best project decision. There is no chance of correctly answering such questions without correctly determining the development approach being used. If you think there is not enough information to determine the selected development approach, look for keywords. If a question mentions that the project is in a hierarchical or bureaucratic setting, this means that the project is plan-driven and hence uses the predictive approach. If a question asks you to choose the most appropriate development approach for a project, consider the different phases it requires based on the project needs. In the predictive approach, the project phases develop sequentially from one phase to another downward like a waterfall. A major advantage of using the predictive approach is that defining the details up front leaves little room for arguments as work progresses. It also reduces project risks. However, as everything is agreed upon up front, making any changes to the project later on will cause more problems. For those reasons, the goal of the project manager should be to prevent changes before they occur. If the change is inevitable, the project manager needs to follow the formal change control procedures. Compared to the other development approaches, the predictive approach requires the least collaboration between key stakeholders because everything is defined up front. However, collaboration is always key for the success of any project, regardless of the development approach used. In the predictive approach, there is typically, though not always, a single delivery of the final product at the end of the project. This means that the project's value is also realized at the end of the project.